should have plugged in my regular keyboard instead of the mechanical.
No, you gotta have it.
it's
That's
cool.
I think that's the background track of. I've got because I miss working in an office. I've got just a 10-hour loop of mechanical keyboard sounds that plays in the background.
Shouldn't we all? Really?
All day. You hear that? Can I get
People sneezing?
Can I get a producer to mic this? Listen to that. All day. It just keeps me going. Look at this. Yep. Productive. If you could see my screen. Just the amount of home row.
I actually have one of the old IBM M series ones, like one of the ones.
Real deal.
Yes, you could bludgeon
have
a
like
person
the
to
curly
death.
Q, like scratchy keyboard.
Like, it could be used as an accessory for murder.
My man.
And
it's a very versatile accessory.
It really Big Blue knows what it's doing. Okay, they say their first rodeo. And so like I have, like, you know, obviously my wife's just like, ugh, that thing's so loud and stupid, I hate it. You know, she's in the other room and is, you know, hearing me like I'm, you know, digging through the wall in Shawshank.
She calls you from Little Rock and she's
Yes.
like, just get off of the dang thing. Like, come on.
You're on the Model M again. Yeah.
I know. And it was probably, I don't know, maybe a month and a half ago. I was like, listen, I'm really sorry about this, but I'm going to have to get a new keyboard, which means I'm going to have to get like 4 new keyboards and then see which one I like. And she's like, oh, because I've just been because I found the thing at a thrift store for like $275. Like, I was like, this is the find of my life. Like, I'll never find anything used secondhand ever again that's this good. And I've just been extolling its virtues. I got it hooked up to an adapter and my USB-C hub.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think I have to, because I can't, all the shortcuts and the Mac OS update, like I can't do any of them now. And it's like, I think it's time. And she was like, oh, you're getting rid of that stupid keyboard.
I can't believe that you're over here sitting on a Model M amongst a team of software engineers and you haven't shared that information. That is like, I know that is in your culture bank, that you put that back there and you're like, this is a deposit that you're not willing to spend yet. Right.
Well, see, I've been hesitant to, because I want to do a series on like, what is your daily driver? Like, what's your setup? And so I don't want to tip my hands too much.
That's
I know.
Number 2, all blank, baby.
I know. I saw that. I saw that in your desk shot you sent me and was like, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
Love it. Well, we're not talking about keyboards today, but man, that's a good topic for sure.
We can revisit. We will revisit that, absolutely. As we think about the transition and the comment on this, I want to know, Casey, I feel like it was a very deliberate decision to call this role or the space that we've carved out product owner. Why is that, and how did it happen?
That's a good one. That's a good one because this role wasn't called product owner originally, for us at least.
Yeah.
Man, and this has moved so fast. I'm going to ask a really dumb question, but Joseph, was your job title product owner when you started here?
It actually was, yeah.
We started it then. I think that was when it was right around then. If not, I might have interviewed Joseph under the pretense of this job's called product owner. But product owner, that's not a name that I came up with. Product owner comes to us from the Agile methodology, particularly in Scrum. It's very important, the product owner role. But it wasn't for a lot of companies. It's not a job title; it's a chair that someone sits in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for us, it was that same way. I think that the first iteration of this job for Lofty, the actual job title we gave people was client services manager, I think is what it was. And at the time, the role was much more about communicating with clients rather than managing the outcome of the product.
Mm-hmm.
And then at one point, we did project managers where the role was much more about managing the outcome of the product than the communication.
Yeah.
And there were a couple, I mean, there might have even been a point where we called it client success managers or something like that. But at the end of the day, no matter who we put into that job and what title we gave them, at the end of the day, we were asking them to sit in on client projects doing the Agile job within
Yeah.
the Agile framework that is known as product owner.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just made sense at one point that like we're really leaning into Agile. This is really how we do it here. So let's make the job title match up with the position there. Like let's step all the way into it and not have one foot in both worlds and say no. Like we're hiring people to be product owners and we're going to give them that job title, which has been really really neat, right? We're owning it for lack of a better term.
That's really cool. So it was more of a, it was less about a kind of a philosophy change in your expectations for them and more attached to you saying, okay, like we've been flirting with Agile for a while now. Let's do this. Let's really, really do this.
It was both. It was both, right? It was a, we've been flirting with Agile. Let's really, really do this. But in making that decision, it was very much a philosophy change for the role, because what we've told clients for a long time and what we tell potential product people, product owners that we want to come work for us, that their job is to be the CEO of the product that they're working on, right?
Mm-hmm.
That in so much like our clients, obviously the CEO at the client might be like, excuse me, but hang on, Mr. Client, Mrs. Client, let me explain. Obviously our clients have their own setup as far as the leadership and the executives, and we're often working with CEOs, but they're CEOs of the larger organization. Usually the product is some smaller component of it. And what we mean by that when we say CEO of the product is that they're the position of highest accountability, right? As a CEO, that's one of the main aspects of my job, is at the end of the day, I hold the highest accountability of what happens within my organization. And that's where like things changed a lot for us in putting folks into that role, is that we put someone within Lofty with that degree of accountability to the success or failure of a product, which is a huge step from being earlier in our days as the type of company that came in and took some orders, right? What kind of app would you like to build? Would you like fries with that? Here you go. And shifting us to a place where we were truly being consultative, because we were installing someone as a leader within the project that held that accountability. So truly, like by titling people product owner, it makes them think every day about the ownership that they're taking of that responsibility within the product.
Yeah, and I would just add that when you look at the Scrum institution, and when you look at the Agile framework altogether, I think that there's oftentimes an ambiguity between like a product manager and a product owner. And a big part of that ambiguity would just be how the individual institution operationalizes backlog management. And so to that degree at Lofty, one of the things that we've highlighted is kind of a single point of contact. That's why we call a product owner the CEO of the project, because what we're really looking at there is, rather than having a product divided out across multiple managers and adding to the complexity of who needs to be communicated about what different component of production for a specific product or for software development, we're looking at, this is the one person who lives as responsible for this project specifically. And then I think that simplifies our work with clients. It makes it a lot easier to make the decisions that need to be made, not only at the prioritization level of backlog for a product, but also at the introduction or removal of cards or features with a really close partnership with the client, right? So kind of overall, I would say that introduces a much greater dependency for interaction with the client and for a really strong partnership with whoever it is that is the actual, like we would say, CEO of that product or CEO of that particular engagement. So I think that's important, kind of from that perspective, because it can be really confusing. And I say that because, Casey, you mentioned, was it called product owner when you got hired on? And I did the searches, right? I had some knowledge of Lofty before coming on, and talked with our director of engineering, Tyrell, a little bit about it, and he said that they're looking for a product owner. And I did a little research, and I mean, I remember our first interviews, Casey. I was fairly confused. I said, I think you asked
Look,
me.
I don't know. Y'all don't have any of those product owner things on LinkedIn.
What you did, and you said, like, well, what do you understand a product owner to be? I said, well, to be honest, I had a little bit of confusion between product owner, product manager, and of course, I found Kagan and some of those names in the product world, and I said, what I don't know is this, but what I do know is this. And I would say that what we sussed out in those meetings even began I would call even those initial interviews some of the genesis of us really starting to form up what Agile looks up like at Lofty, and what it looks like for the product owner to be the person to unblock, to remove barriers, to really interact deeply with the client, to have a partnership, and to be able to even export our culture inside of the product. So,
that's great.
That last bit's super important too, right? Because we tell our clients all the time. I told a client this morning, no matter what your business is, when you come to us to have us start building some software for you, you're becoming a software company. I think we even talked about this maybe a little bit in the last video.
Yeah.
It's so important that folks understand that maybe you are in the business of day-to-day, some form of engineering, right? Some form of real engineering, as I call it, because we're software engineering. We get to break stuff that blows up on the first try, and we call that an iteration. But like, say you're building bridges, right? Or parking decks. That's your bread and butter. But once you start building some software that is a complement to that, or an offering of your service, you're a software company too, and you have to start thinking about these aspects of software development that are different maybe from your core business. But at some point, once that software is built, you have to operate it, and that's why when Joseph mentions we're sort of injecting that culture into our clients. That's important because part of our culture is it's a culture of delivery around software products, amongst other things, right? But at its core, that's what it's all based on. So that's really important for clients to get an opportunity to have that. We often, when we're done with the engagement, when we're done building the software, at the very least, we're leaving a practice behind. And the product owner, the developers and designers on the teams they've got plenty full plates of going and building that work. And so it falls to the product owner to be the steward of making sure that practice gets left behind as well.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's really tight. And it's interesting to hear the conversation about, kind of where it came from and how that was intertwined with Agile. And this feels like a good time to go ahead and introduce ourselves. So I'll go first. My name is Chris Allen, the Director of Marketing here at Lofty.
Hello, Chris.
And with us, we have Casey Kinsey, the founder and CEO, and we have Joseph Clifton, one of the product owners here at Lofty, joining us today. And so one of the things I want to do now, guys, is we've kind of danced around the issue, and it feels like talking about product ownership means we've got to have a discussion about Agile. And so if you guys could give me, and for a lot of people, this is going to be old news, but for a lot of us, we've heard the word a lot of times, right? It's pretty cool. It's, a good hashtag for LinkedIn, but we don't always know exactly what that means. And so if you guys could talk about what that means in general and kind of what that means specifically at Lofty.
Are you asking me what a hashtag means, Chris? Because you're a director of marketing. I wanted you to tell me what a hashtag means.
I wanted to get this on camera just so neither of us get back away from it.
Yeah, that's good. Plausible deniability. I like instinctively want to jump in on this, but I gotta let Joseph give the intro on Agile because he's
Mhm.
he's a product owner here, and yeah, Joseph, give it to us in your words, and then
Yeah.
I'll try and maybe like give the CEO's perspective on it because CEOs we
Mhm.
tend to get really confused by this kind of thing.
Yeah. So, man, where to start, right? Like, um, point you to any body of work over the past 25 years, and you can read for days on it. So it's hard to try to put a definition around something that is so all encompassing, right? Everyone has heard Agile, but we regularly do a an introduction session with clients and come on and do an introduction not only to Agile, but more specifically to Lofty's Agile. And the reason for that is that I think that the Scrum Alliance, I think that Agile even says that they don't it's not considered a framework anymore. There's been even in renditions or different editions of what whether it's a framework or a philosophy, and I think we've landed on philosophy these days. So we'll start there, which is that Agile is actually a philosophy. It's a philosophy for how to get work done, and then Scrum is kind of like the methodology around that or inside of Agile, that allows measurable outcomes, right? So there are a couple different methodologies. One of those would also be Kanban, right? And everybody would have done some research on that as well. So there's a couple different ones. We tend to, in Lofty's world, use one of those two methodologies, but overall, it is the simply ability to be agile, meaning flexible and distinct, make decisions, and respond to change ultimately. There are principles inside of Agile for like core principles, for core pillars, and then like 12 principles that we can walk through as many as the day is long. But the key things would be, for us especially, focus on understanding the people at the center of the product, being able to get some actual testing done on the people that a product is core for, um, testing with people and getting feedback from them, and then being able to develop a product around actual need for a business, right? So I
Mhm.
can't get away from it without saying that there's actual business need at the very core of all of that, right? um, some that involves a couple other things as well. Man, yeah, it's just so deep. I can talk on this for 45 minutes, so I'm trying to be a little more succinct. I would say that what we do here at Lofty really focuses on establishing the kind of boundaries of the house that we live inside of, the agile house that we live inside of, for whoever we're working with, so that everyone has a very clear understanding and expectation, and then we can put some process around that, discover what needs to be discovered, unearth what needs to be unearthed, and then set some outcomes that we can actually predict against. We do that in cycles called iterations, and it allows feedback to be in a consistent loop, um, and allows buy-in from early adopters all the way through a mature product. I think is that good, Casey? How we go? Is that enough?
You're good. You're good. And then y'all forgive me because I probably got a little bit of delay on my end. I noticed my Joseph's audio was catching up to me. So this is a note to myself to come in and clean up my edit here. But um, yeah, I think I think that's a good description of it. And if I may, from a software engineer's perspective, because I was an engineer um, long before I was a business manager, but part of understanding what Agile is, something that helps is understanding what Agile was kind of up against, what it sought to disrupt, if you will,
Uh-huh.
some years ago, which is the I would say probably more intuitive methodology of building something the way that we build things in the physical world, which in software, the process was often called something like waterfall. And waterfall, like I said, is what I think is intuitive to people about how you go about building something, because waterfall treats software development the same way you might build a house, right? Which is that you design it all first, right? And then you frame it all next. And then you add finishes next. But you do the whole thing, right? You know the end outcome. You set a budget on the end goal,
Mm-hmm.
and then you go through you figure out dependencies, like can't run electrical until we have walls to run it through, but you can't finish the walls till the electrical's in, and it's bad to put insulation in after drywall, I'm told. And so you figure out all these dependencies, and then you do it top to bottom, and you try and hit a budget at the end. And like, that's hard enough in construction. Anyone that's ever done it, like we all know, right, that like construction projects end up with cost overruns and difficulties. And it's like, whether you've done a remodel yourself or you've just observed it, or if you've watched Fixer Upper a couple times, you know that can be kind of risky, right? In software, it's so much worse. It's so much worse. We can't go to the login store and buy 20 square feet of login screens. We kind of have to go implement it. Like, the building analogies start to fall apart really quickly, but they come up often, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't work the same way. There's a lot of variables. It's like you're building things with individual atoms and molecules. So we still built software that way. We still estimated businesses, for the software got built how it got built. The processes were there for the businesses to just try and figure out, what the hell is it actually going to cost? How long is this actually going to take? How many people do I need to hire? How much of a budget do I need to go fight for to get this thing done? Thus, the processes came out. But Agile as a philosophy is totally different. Agile tells us that there's a different way of doing things, and it was specific to software. And now I see people running Agile marketing campaigns, and it's been applied in a lot of different ways. But it came for software, and the idea was that planning everything up front in advance was a fool's errand, because things were going to change. And when things change in software world, they change in radically fundamental ways. It's not like, let's make the kitchen a little bit bigger now that I'm looking at it, It's like, let's change something that's so fundamental to how the application works that we're setting off a chain reaction that changes everything. So planning that big thing up in advance doesn't work really well. What if we changed our perspective to a world where we started shipping software quickly instead of waiting 2 years for the whole thing to be done, like a house? What if we just build the one room that you need today, and we start there, and we actually get a person to come sit in the room and say, what do you think of this room? And they say, boy, I sure wish there was a door there. And someone nudges someone else and says, I'm so glad we didn't build the door on the other side, because now we're finding out that's not where they want it. That's the idea of Agile. To iterate and plan as you go, to do those things, but also find frameworks for the business to be able to estimate. Okay, like, you can't just come in and start building with no plan. You can't, it's a hard sell to come in and say, we're going to go build this application for you. I have no idea how long it's going to take or how much money it's going to cost, but like every 2 weeks, we're going to show up and start digging, right? That's a scary thing. Agile sought to say, let's find a way to do it like that, but then find, frameworks within it, process frameworks like Scrum, like Kanban, that give us the ability to measure progress and project where we're going, so that there's a way to cost it, but to not have to get everything perfectly right. And there's no big upfront design in Agile. That's to boil it down. That's what it's up against. The idea of big upfront design, put a team in a room for 2 years and go see what comes out the other side. Agile was up against that. So that's the idea, is to get rid of upfront design as you go, and optimize towards the quickest outcome by getting feedback along the way.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think is most interesting. Maybe that's a nice way to say it, but another way might be to say hardest about it is client education around this, because what we're doing is we're saying, hey, this is better for you. It doesn't feel like it. This is better for you. It's like getting a kid to take the Flintstone vitamins, right? we know this is better for them, and we can't guarantee product market fit, but we can guarantee product market fit with this better than any other solution. And getting them to understand that, hey, we can give you this black box of deliverables in 18 months, but it might have cost you 4 times more than it should have. And you're not going to know all along the way if that's even what you or your customers want.
Yeah.
And so being able to segment that into chunks and allow the customer to keep their hand on the till and understand what's happening through the whole process, exactly where their money's going, it seems like that would be drop dead easy, but it's not, is it?
Not at all. Well, I say not at all. We are fortunate in that we didn't invent this. It's been around for a while. And so to some extent, it is at the very least, the notion of being agile, right? However vague and abstractly someone might interpret that, is at least in the lexicon of buyers of services like Lofty provides these days, right?
Yeah.
Now, whether or not our customers have actually gone through the experience of using Agile as a methodology totally depends. Some customers have. The education portion of that is very different. But yeah, it is tough for anyone to rationally look at what Agile is, because like I said, it's very counterintuitive. You want to, look, I just bought a house, and it's an older house, and it needs some updates, and so we're doing some updating, and so I'm having projects bid out by vendors, right? And if a plumber came to me, okay, and they said, yeah, totally, we can fix your hot water problem, guaranteed, 100%, we're going to get it right. I don't know how long it's going to take. And I see that you've asked me for this, and this, and that's a great starting point. But what we're going to do here is we're going to do a little bit of time. We're going to work through it. We're going to come back and check with you, have you go take a shower, maybe see what you think of it. We're going to come back, and we're going to do that over a period of X time. And it costs this much per hour, but I'm not totally sure how many hours it's going to take, but I know we're going to get the problem solved at the end of it. I would be like, I'm sorry, what?
Exactly.
Because it's not intuitive to me, right? Like I want to go like, no, I need to know how much it's going to cost. I have to budget this, I need to compare this to other things. And so that's the part that's really tricky. Like, even if people grasp the idea of like, this is great, you're going to find the shortest path to success, I still don't have visibility on how much it costs. Like often I think a client might opt to, without, like, if we're not able to explain it well enough, take an estimate that Lofty gives that says, I think we can do this in a year, but I can't guarantee you exactly what it looks like at the end of that year. But I do believe that we can solve the business problem that year, versus someone else saying, in 18 months, I will give you exactly everything you have on the specification. And that might cost 3 times as much as my year, but it's a known quantity because at the end of my year, the client may not believe that their problem is technically solved. I didn't give them a strict number. So it's not even that, like, it's not even an economics thing. It's just, it's certainty, right? And that's where the risk part of the conversation starts to come into play, because there's risks on both sides of that. But yeah, it can be really tricky. We work really hard to do it, to educate customers and help them understand the benefits here. But at the end of the day, what it mostly comes down to, I think the thing that like when people get it, they get it, is that the odds of that spec sheet that you have of, I want an app that does this, and when I click here, it does this, and the odds of that being the right thing that needs to be built, and the odds of that sheet actually including everything you want and actually including everything that you need, there's not holes in it that are missing, is almost zero. There's almost 0% chance that that's exactly right. And Agile as a philosophy and Scrum as a methodology is a process by which we get in there and start building and solving those problems. And the fact that that document's not right doesn't matter at all. We don't have to have the scope right. That's the moment, I think, when that clicks for people.
Yeah.
They go like, we can get this done. We can get it done right. We can find success. And we don't have to perfectly know where we're going 2 years out, is actually quite an opportunity. There's a lot of risk that goes away at that point.
And you've touched on it. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, just really quickly, Casey, you made the comment that we are very fortunate that we didn't develop Agile. This is not something new that we're bringing to the market, and that's true. And I want to add the flip side to that as well, which is that it's also sometimes unfortunate because recently, within the past 6 months, we started work with someone who had also engaged with a software agency prior to us, and they had said we're going to do Agile, and they presented very much of the same content that we are presenting right now. Lots of charts and graphs. I actually happened to see some of that presentation, and what came out of that though was not what we're talking about. There was not demonstratable movement every 2 weeks that allowed for the consideration by the person signing that check every time to ask for change or to respond to difficulties and barriers that had come up. And so oftentimes we get even a little bit of a feedback of like, oh yeah, we know that Agile thing. But there are some really clear flares for if you've actually seen and operated inside of an environment that truly adheres to the Agile philosophy. One of those would be demonstratable work. We do demos every either 1 week or 2 weeks, depending on the cycle that we have set for our sprint. Every time, we don't miss them. Even if we have missed a goal, like even if a barrier has been unearthed that is bigger than we could overcome, we do a demo of what happened, and we also describe the barrier to you, the person who has the expertise and can actually look at that and say, yeah, you're right, that's a big barrier. Not only can you say that, but you can also say, but because I'm the expert in this area, I can tell you that you might want to look in this direction for that solution. It becomes a conversation. And if you're seeing that in the Agile environment that you're in, great. If you're not though, then I would question whether that philosophy has really been imbibed. So.
And I think this is a really good opportunity for us to talk about the risk and trust involved in Agile, and how, it's that goes both ways, right? We both teams have to take risks. Both teams have to trust each other, and understanding that uncomfortable tension is there and it's real, and it can be for a reason. But understanding that at the outset can create much more sustainable outcomes afterwards.
Embarking to build software is one of the riskier things that a software can do, or that a business can do. Period. It's generally speaking, I don't want to misrepresent. There's some inherently risky businesses out there, but you get what I'm saying. And it's because of that complexity that we talked about earlier that Agile seeks to actually fortify against, which is that it's really, really difficult to estimate things. There's this classic study. I can't remember the author off the top of my head, but he had analyzed a bunch of IT and software development projects over a period of something like 20 years. It's a classic book. And he had this notion of the cone of uncertainty within software development. And based on the empirical data that he collected, estimates for the cost of actually developing software products were so varied at the beginning from what the actual cost ended up being that the swing was like 4x in either direction. So what that means is, like, from the actual cost of what it cost when it was done, if you went back to the beginning, all those projects, they were as much as 1/4 of the cost was the estimate, or 4 times the cost, which is a spread of 16-fold.
Yeah.
Right. Like, one estimate was 16 times the size of the other. And in some cases, you were off that much at the end of it. And you only really know how much it's going to cost, how much it actually really will cost with any sort of certainty, very deep into the implementation of the project, way past the planning phase, way past the start of the implementation phase. You're getting close to shipping, and then you start to get some visibility on the horizon of like, ooh, this is going to be done in 2 months, right?
Yeah.
And so that is just risky by itself. So there's a tremendous amount of risk in building software because of the cost risk of what it's going to take to develop. And that doesn't have anything to do with Agile.
Mhm.
Right. And that's something we like to point out to people. It's like there's risk in this. It has nothing to do with the philosophy that we use. Right. Now, I'm a firm believer in process and methodology personally. I've built that into Lofty's culture, that we're a very process-oriented organization and we want repeatable, consistent results. If you have a process, you can tweak it. You know, if everyone's just making it up as they go, it's really hard to make an improvement. But if there's a document, right, if there's a guide of steps to do it, you can improve an individual step and the whole thing gets better. And so the trust aspect of it comes from us asking a client to trust us that this methodology we're going to put in place is actually de-risking, right?
Yeah.
And then the flip side of it for us is we're trusting the client often with the domain knowledge part of it, right? I can't tell you how many times someone's come to me or to Lofty to build software and we said like, hey, there's this whole thing here that's very esoteric to your industry that you're describing that we don't know. You know, we know a lot of things, but we're not specialists in X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And the client says, that part's easy. All right. And that's the part where Lofty is trusting. It's just like, I hope so. You know? Because when we estimate because it's not that we don't estimate how long it's going to take. So it's not that no one's going to buy anything without me being able to give some sort of bookend and what's it going to cost, you know, even if that comes with a bunch of caveats of how we do things. But yeah, so that trust absolutely goes both ways. And Joseph, you're as a product owner, you are the trust broker in your engagements. I mean, how do you feel that goes?
Yeah.
If you don't have the trust, it doesn't go well. I mean, that's 100%.
Right. So I think that's where the whole spectrum of trust risk kind of lives in this space here, right? We've got the one aspect that you talked about where there's the trust that needs to be built just on the front end of it as any kind of a partnership, right? So you can talk about any kind of partnership and you're going to have to eventually and hopefully up at the very front start talking about what level of trust exists here, and that expectation should come not only because you're a software development company, so you know how to develop software, right? That can be done pretty well without actually much experience, and even without much good experience, right? So initializing that trust by describing process, by indicating the direction that we're going to go, and then also by having valuable questions and interactions and feedback, right? So like Casey said, one of our primary questions is, this thing that you're an expert in, we are not an expert in. And it's us being very trusting to say, we're going to take this on and attempt to build the thing that you're asking for that hasn't been built before, that is new creation, with the belief that you do know what you're asking for, and you know how to solve the problems that are going to come up. Not just, I know what I'm asking for, I have definition for it, but I can engage in this partnership in a solutions oriented model. And we can say the expert area that the domain area that we are experts in, we can solve those same problems. But we also don't expect that level of trust to start off at a 5-year relationship. So when in the past people would have approached and said, well, we don't know that we want to want to engage with you in that way, but maybe we can do a partnership of our companies. We'll give you some stock in this thing. It's like, well, that kind of trust is not really what we're looking for. We're looking for is the genesis of a relationship. And then every 2 weeks, you should be gaining more trust from us. Again, I just say like their flares for a true agile philosophy would be every 2 weeks, you're looking at that demo, you're looking at what we're doing, and you're saying, we trust you more because we can see what you're demonstrating. We see the value of the questions you're asking. And at the same time, that should be de-risking the project for you because we're asking clarifying questions for you to dig deeper into your domain. Things that haven't been solved should have unsolved questions, and we should be helping you find what those questions are, right? So we are de-risking the technology component while you're de-risking the expertise component. And then as we build more trust, we recognize that that there's more that we can hand over. So as a product owner, this is specifically useful because I will oftentimes say, I think we need to take this out of the backlog altogether. This is a past paradigm. But remember when we discovered X, Y, and Z? I don't think this thing is even valuable anymore. What do you think? And oftentimes the product owner on the other side or just a stakeholder on the other side will say, yeah, let's go ahead and take that out. You're right. That's not even the paradigm we're going towards anymore. Or they might say, actually, you're right, but we did go this other direction. Should we add this stuff to the backlog? Yeah, you're right. We should. What's the priority on that? That's a tangible hypothetical situation.
Well, and like I can see that that's extremely hypothetical, and or maybe came up in a backlog grooming today as well.
Yeah.
But like I mean, like to give counter to see it from different sides. If you're an organization that's watching this, or you represent an organization that's engaged another team to build software, like one of the worst things, and lots of organizations have this experience because they tell us about it all the time. One of the worst dynamics you can have going with that team is when you say, can you do this technical thing? Or how long will it take to do this technical thing? Or some question about the technical thing that they're the problem they're there to solve. And they give the answer and you don't believe them. Right. Yeah. That's one of the worst dynamics you can have with your software team, where you're like, yeah, they said a week, but you know it's going to take a month, right?
Yep.
Or yeah, they said they can do it, but I don't know if they're going to, drop. Obviously, that's a bad thing in any sort of relationship where you're procuring services from someone else. You want to feel confident they can deliver, right?
Yeah.
But the flip side of that on the software side is when we say like, hey, are you going to be able to get us that information? Do we have access to that person that knows that? Or like, will this part be easy? And the client says like, yeah, absolutely. Or even when it's down to a feature of like, we say, does the user really need to do that? And they say, oh yeah, the app would never function. No one would ever use it if it doesn't do that. It's a very terrible thing from the software team side for us to look at the stakeholder who's just telling us directly right in the face, yes, it needs to be built this way. And us internally to go, I don't think that's what the users need at all.
Yeah.
And building a lot of software, I don't think this is the right thing to do. So that trust goes both ways very much, right? And by the way, the problem there isn't really necessarily a matter of competence on either side. In either one of those examples, it's not about like whether or not someone's like consistently right or wrong or good at what they do. It's really a matter of communication, right? Are we asking the right questions to build that trust so that we're confident, right? And if trust is being broken or people aren't delivering, is it because people are making, expectations that aren't accurate? And so that's one of the big parts of Agile as a philosophy is, things like we're talking a lot about process, and process is so important to it. Yet right at the beginning of like the Agile core tenets, they tell you that it's, it's about individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Doesn't mean that processes aren't important. It's just that the individual interactions are more important than the process, right? That like it's more important for two people to have a conversation and resolve a problem than it is to push the button because the playlist says to push the button next. So yeah,
and I think that hits on a really good point in kind of circling back on our earlier discussion about, why Joseph, why we have owners instead of managers is that without that level of buy-in and communication, it can't work unless we have people who are intentional in the trenches, in there, advocating for the customer, internally, and then, talking about why we got to this point externally with our development partners, and having someone who owns that and who understands the importance of communication is going to make all the difference. Because if there's not healthy, robust, intentional communication and a rapport built inside that, it can't work.
Yeah, I completely agree. And to that point, Chris, like that's why, you know, where we always want to focus that conversation on is the partnership, right? It does not work. It just doesn't work to have said that we are operating in agile philosophy because we have a Scrum board, because we use a particular kind of tool, or because we are in software development. The reason that it works is because of the closeness that we can have as a team to have a focused goal and to move towards it with process around it, so we have viable, measurable outcomes. Yeah, we can keep talking for a long time. I don't know how much more we want to dive in.
We'll hold there. I'll go ahead and ask if kind of the last thing I would like to hit on is, Casey, if you think you talking about impact to the business, right? How product ownership, how Agile as a methodology impacts the business, with the idea being that, you know, we can talk about how great it is, you know, how great we are, how great Joseph is, and how great it is as a philosophy. And that can be as long or as short as you'd like. And then I'll thank you guys, thank the viewers, ask for likes and subscribes, tell them to have a great day.
Cool. Sounds good.
Bueno.
Bueno.
Okay. All right, guys. And we've been talking a lot today about, you know, where the company takes Agile, how we use Agile. One of the things I'm really interested in, and I know a lot of people are, is what's the impact been to the business, right? Like, how has this impacted the business? What's it been like as a business owner operator, Casey, for you to so intentionally plant Lofty's flag in Agile?
For our business, man, it changed a lot of things, and like in turn, a big, almost immeasurable impact on the success that we were able to have for our customers. Because, man, there's just so much anxiety in the early days as a young company of, you know, it was, and you could attribute it to a lot of individual things, communication problems, misestimation, like delivery, like technical challenges. So many things can go, can be introduce adversity into like a development engagement. And when we made the switch to Agile truly, and specifically Scrum, the methodology within it that we use most of the time, it as a philosophy, it addressed so many of those individual nuanced things that we could have tried to take them on one by one. Like, well, we're going to communicate better. Well, Scrum sets the standards for communications of like, yeah, you're going to communicate every day. You know? And there's no such thing as a big reveal. Like, you don't disappear for 3 months and then come back and say, here it is, I hope you like it. Because you're going to have a demo of that work at the end of the review. And we can say, man, we really could estimate better, but also we're inventing something from scratch. So it's impossible to look at a task and go how many hours it's going to take, right? Well, Scrum gives us that as well, but it comes in the form of velocity. It comes in the form of being able to estimate the complexity of things and understand, not with any extreme amount of accuracy, this individual task is going to take this long, but to be able to look at a body of work and say, this body of work can be accomplished in the next 2 weeks. We feel confident in that. And there are 3 or 4 bodies of work of comparable size between now and the thing that a customer has asked about. When do I get this? This is the type of question that comes up all the time. And the answer is like, well, 3 or 4 of these sprints that we're doing are stacked up in front of it, but you get to change the priority right now and tell me that this is more important than the next body of work, and it goes right to the top of the list for the next sprint. And so it was all of those things at once. I mean, it was like a communication protocol, a boundaries in some cases, right? So like there can be over communication. There can be clients talking directly to engineers that can't get the work done, or vice versa. Engineers not researching their own questions and going straight to the client. How do I do that? How do I do that? Like those kinds of things that all of those pieces together just solved a great deal of problems. And for us, at the end of the day, it meant that predictable outcomes, right? That we would sometimes in the very early days, I don't want to spook any potential customers of Lofty, but many years ago, in a different time, before we had all of this, we would have one project that was going extremely well and one project that was not going well at all, right?
Yeah.
It was very easy to look at that and attribute it to individual dynamics. There must be someone on this team that client must be bad, or that engineer on that project must be bad. But the reality was that it was just a bunch of random interactions on both of them. And either one of them could have come up tails a couple times in a row. And once there was a process, that consistent delivery, how do we measure for a client? How do we estimate for a client? How do we make sure we always deliver for a client? Having that consistent across the board, we couldn't have scaled the company without it for Lofty, because we couldn't solve enough problems. We couldn't organize how to get that much done at once without it. So, it's just immeasurable. And I can't say that it's 100% because Agile's the best way. The presence of a methodology at all is the most important thing.
Yeah.
We believe in this methodology. We've gone very aggressively deep in training our people on that methodology, because you have to pick one. And we believe that this is a very good one, I'm not so much of an evangelist that I say everyone needs to be using Agile or Scrum, but you need to be using something. And this is the one that we've chosen and we've built up expertise in.
That's awesome. I think hearing about, Agile in general, and then specifically how Lofty tailors that to our customer interactions, and then seeing how it's driven positive outcomes for the business, and especially for our clients, right? That's why we're here. We don't exist to just exist. What we're doing and what Agile allows us to do as a team is drive successful outcomes for our clients. And so hearing about how Agile is an integral part of that, and how it's, changed our culture, and hopefully something that we can export to those clients we work with, has been really special. We appreciate your guys' time today. Thanks, Casey and Joseph. And as always, you guys, thanks for watching. There'll be more of these. So if you're enjoying them, make sure to like and subscribe. That way you'll get that notification when the next one comes out. And we're looking forward to seeing you guys in. Bye.